You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt. We are coming to you on October 13th of 2021. Sorry for this being a little bit of a extended absence for us. I know we recorded last week on Monday. We were going to had off all intentions of coming back after both wildcard games were over, but we'll let Matt explain what the holdup was.
Yeah, so we were gonna come back after the wild card games, preview the NLDS, have a nice episode last Wednesday, and then the weather happened. We actually had some extreme flooding here in Birmingham, where they recorded 14 inches of rain in like 4 hours.
That's crazy.
And yeah, that's probably about as much rain as you get in a year, Damian.
Yeah, probably.
And we had some severe flooding, including in my little townhouse community here, where I had about 1.5 feet of water all around my house, and it didn't really leak onto my floors that much, but it couldn't really record. The internet was out because I looked outside. My internet cable was in front of my neighbor's house, and the box was like sticking out of the ground, and it was rough. And luckily it didn't damage anything too bad in my house. There's still mud all over the place in my driveway and on the road behind my house and all that stuff. But luckily I didn't have any severe damage inside, and everything outside like the cable and stuff is paid for. So it could have been a lot worse for me. But I have a lot of people around here have pretty severe property damage, and the crazy thing is that I wasn't in a floodplain, so I don't have flood insurance on my house because I'm outside of a 500-year floodplain. So that's how crazy this amount of rain we got was in the flooding. So there's so much so much rain that it caused a flood that was probably a once every 500 years flood. So I'm just glad that it wasn't any worse than it was. But yeah, so we weren't able to do that last Wednesday, but we had a great week of baseball, and we're gonna get into it tonight. So
yeah, and then we usually we record on Tuesdays, but there was so much happening yesterday. We had 3 potential game clinching scenarios, and there's no games today, so we decided just to push it one day so we could have the most up to date, like this is who's moving on, or potential game 5 scenarios. But we'll go ahead and jump right in. We've wasted enough of your guys' time already. We'll start over in the AL with the wild card game. We had the Red Sox versus the Yankees, and that was an insane game to say the least. Garrett Cole really struggled throughout the game. I think he had like 50-something pitches in the third inning when they ended up pulling him out. He had given up 3 runs, and really just the Yankees didn't have anything to answer. Once Boston got that lead, they kind of shut it down, and Boston ended up winning that game 6-2.
yeah, that was a tough game for the Yankees. The first things first, a lot of people are giving Garrett Cole a lot of grief, and a lot of that goes back to the fact that when after the spin rate, after the sticky stuff thing changed, his spin rate dropped, and he didn't pitch quite as well, but he was still very good until late September when he started dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury. So I think that the issues he had last week had a lot more to do with the hamstring injury and not being 100%. He had struggled late in September after he went down and missed the start from that. So that's definitely something that was unfortunate for him. But the Yankees just looked like they were tight. They came out, weren't ready to go. You have the first inning where Giancarlo Stanton hits a fly ball off the monster, and he pimps it, thinks it's a home run, and ends up at first base. And and also that probably cost Matt Vasgersian his job. So, because he was watching Stanton and yelling, "It's gonna be gone, it's gonna be gone," and then it hits the middle, halfway up the wall. It's like, well, okay, buddy. But yeah, Nate Eovaldi looked extremely good in that game. I think he had several strikeouts and looked dominant. The Yankees did claw back a little bit, but the Red Sox just too much hitting. Xander Bogaerts, I think, homered in the game. I think Schwarber homered in the game, which was funny because Schwarber homered off of Garrett Cole when Cole was a Pirate and Schwarber was a Cub in the wild card game in the NL. So then he homered off of him in the AL wild card game as a Red Sox against the Yankees. So that was kind of interesting. But It was a pretty good game. The atmosphere at Fenway seemed incredible. The fans were really into it from the beginning, as you would have expected in that game. And it advanced the Red Sox zone to play their division rival, their other division rival in the Rays. So that was a very entertaining way to start the postseason.
Yeah, it really was. Like you said, the energy in Fenway was insane. Especially for those rivalry games, it's always going to get even more crazy. And we kind of have that going on with a little bit in one of the series we'll talk about in a minute. But let's jump over to the NL wildcard game where we had the Dodgers versus the Cardinals in Los Angeles. This game was a nerve-wracking game for me, at least. I mean, as a Dodger fan, the Cardinals come out right in the first inning. They take a lead on a wild pitch from Max Scherzer, who just doesn't look like himself. His command was really all over the place, but he battled the rest of the game, and he didn't let the Cardinals score again. And then in the fourth inning, the Dodgers get a run. I forgot how they get that one. Was it? It
So
was Turner. Turner homered.
Justin Turner homered.
Yeah, Turner homered. It was the first first home run on an Wainwright curveball this year I saw, and it was the first one that he had given up in like 150 innings of something. I don't know. It was something insane, like against the curveball. But that tied the game at 1. And then it went all the way down into the 9th inning. And Chris Taylor came in to pinch hit, didn't get the start, which was really talked about because he had been one of the best Dodger players all year, but kind of struggled later on down the stretch. And he comes in and hits a massive 2-run home run to walk it off and send the Dodgers into playing the Giants in the NLDS.
Yeah, that was a great game as well. I think we all expected Adam Wainwright to pitch really well after the season he had, and the ability that he's always had as a postseason performer. But we expected Max Scherzer to match him pitch for pitch, which he really didn't. I mean, the Cardinals had base runners the entire time Scherzer was in the game. He didn't even go 5 innings in the game, which was kind of surprising. But the thing about that makes the Dodgers so good is that the depth. And they've got a lot more depth in that bullpen. And the Cardinals, ended up getting down to, they got through Gallegos, they got through a couple guys. They ended up getting down to Alex Reyes, who has been absolutely absurdly bad in the second half. And that ended up being the one that cost them. He hung a slider to Chris Taylor. And anytime you have a low scoring game, like that, it's one big hit. And that's kind of the thing you expect in the postseason. These low scoring games, you don't have at least number fives pitching. You don't have a lot of number fours pitching. It's the top of the rotation guys all the time, and you just never know what you might end up seeing. And it turns out it was a great fight from the Cardinals. Not many people expected them to beat the Dodgers, and it was a really really entertaining game. And it happened that the Dodgers were able to pull it off and move on. So both wild card games are pretty entertaining. The Red Sox game after the first few innings got a little bit dull, but just because it wasn't really that close of a game, and it ended up 6-2, and it really didn't feel that close. So then of course that Dodgers Cardinals game was a nail biter all the way to the end. So
Oh, you're
um,
telling me.
yeah, so just really really fun wild card games. That wild card format, I think it would be cool to have a 3-game series for the wild card format, just because it takes a little bit of the randomness out of it. But that one game is so fun every year. It seems like
Yeah.
it always pays off. So, um, but
That
we'll
that that that's
yeah.
definitely something we'll talk about in the off season about maybe this wild card format because it's something that I have heard more about, like obviously over the time, but obviously this year being a fan of a 106 win team that was the second best record in baseball and being in there, it kind of gives you a new little perspective on it as well. So maybe we'll come back to that in the off season about like maybe what the format should look like or something.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and we'll jump over to the ALDS now, and we'll start with the Houston Astros versus the Chicago White Sox. In Game 1, pretty much Houston just their batting just was insane, and then Lance McCullers just pretty much shut it down from the start. He's one of the best big game pitchers there is, and he went 6 2/3, 4 hits, 4 strikeouts. Didn't strike out as many people as he usually does, but no runs, no walks. Just really didn't allow anybody to do anything. While Lance Lynn from the White Sox struggled with 3 2/3, 6 hits, 5 runs, and just right away Houston just took the lead and ran with it.
Yeah, the Astros are a very experienced postseason team. All the guys that they have played in big moments and in big games, played in World Series. Um, you look at Lance McCullers as a guy who is on both of their teams that made it to the World Series. This is their fifth year in a row making it to the ALCS. So they're very experienced in winning these games, winning this, and winning in the postseason. And um, this is a really tough matchup for Lance Lynn as a guy who throws, I think, like around 90% fastballs, at least variations of fastballs. He throws cutters, sinkers, and four seamers. And it's a rough matchup because the Astros just hunt fastballs, and they were able to do that and really hit him around. McCullers, the key stat I think you had there was that McCullers didn't walk anybody in that game, which he
Mhm.
was actually pretty walk prone this year, over 4 walks per 9 in the regular season. So that was very important for the Astros to have that game won. Get some nerves off, get the White Sox on their heels, and then after game one, I mean, it was really not that close except for game three, which was won by the White Sox. You had on on Thursday you had the 6-1 game. Friday you had a 9-4 win for the Astros. Saturday it was a very crazy game where Houston actually went up 5-0. Chicago came all the way back, took the lead, ended up pulling away at the end, won the game, and then Monday you had a 10-1 blowout. So it was tough. There were some tough pitching decisions. Obviously, if you watched it, Carlos Rodon wasn't really 100%. He looked pretty good and he threw real well in the first inning or two. His velocity was back some, but he ran out of gas pretty quick, probably due to not pitching a lot in the second half after injuries. Um, so that was a big deal. Kopech got hit around a little bit. So but I mean, the big thing to me is that the White Sox pitching staff, which I mean, you had those four starters who all four were, honestly close to ace level for four different guys. You had all four of them, and then you had on top of that you had a bullpen that included Aaron Bummer. It included Garrett Crochet, Michael Kopech, and that's not even to mention Craig Kimbrell and Liam Hendricks. So I mean that pitching staff is really the strength of that team, and they just got lit up. They struggled real bad. 7.94 ERA in the series. Dylan Cease gave up 3 runs in 1 2/3 inning. He was a top 10 starter or top 15 starter in baseball. Giolito gave up 4 runs in 4 1/3 innings. Um, Even Kimbrell and Hendricks out of the bullpen really struggled. There was only one pitcher that pitched more than 1 1/3 innings that didn't give up a run, and that was Garrett Crochet, who gave up 5 hits and a walk in 2 1/3 innings. So he really probably should have given up a run, but um, it was a really rough outing for the really, really, really rough outing for the White Sox, and you kind of expect it as a team without all that experience in the postseason. And I thought the White Sox would come out and play better at home than they did. It was their first home playoff game since 2008. So you kind of expected that crowd to really be into it, and they were, and they did win that first game at home in a big comeback. But you look at that series as a whole, and I mean, it's kind of the flip flop of what a lot of people would have expected. I mean, the Astros pitching should shut down the White Sox. You would think that for the Astros to win, every game would have to be kind of high scoring, and it wasn't.
Yeah, the Houston offense is just it's so dang good. I mean, even with the loss of George Springer, it seems like Kyle Tucker pretty much just got right in that lineup and picked up right where Springer left off. Bregman's missed a big chunk of the season, but he's back. Correa has had a really good year going into free agency, and the whole offense just they hit everything. And like you said, they hunt fastballs, so it's kind of a bad matchup with a team like Chicago, where Lynn throws so much. Kopech is really relying on his fastball. Crochet's the same thing. Kimbrell's only a 2-pitch pitcher. Hendrick relies a lot on the fastball, and then Cease he's more of a movement guy, but he still has a really good fastball as well that he uses a lot of the time. And then Rodon, who just kind of ran out of gas, like you said, for not really pitching. It just before the season, I had the White Sox in my World Series prediction, and I was kind of hoping that they would be able to pull it through, but this Houston team, they just look like that team from kind of 2017, 2018, 2019 that they hit so dang good. And maybe last year was just with the whole, sign stealing scandal being kind of unveiled and everything. It just maybe weighed on them a little bit extra. But this team looks like it's back pretty much. But if,
Yeah,
if if we had to pick an MVP from this series, who would you think?
I mean, I think we're gonna pick McCullers. He pitched, in those 2 games in the series, which I think was on 3 days rest the second time,
Yeah,
and he pitched 10 innings, or 10 2/3 innings, 9 hits, just one earned run, 3 walks, and 9 strikeouts. So, I mean, he was really the star of the series for the Houston Astros. You look at the other guys here that, um, you know, that pitched, and the bullpen was also a big help for them, especially Ryan Presley. Pitched in 3 games, didn't give up a run. That was good for them. So, one interesting thing to point out here too, and that wasn't when you talk about the pitching, is Zach Greinke actually came out of the bullpen. He didn't start. He pitched 1 scoreless inning, but he actually didn't start the series. They gave the start to other guys, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But
yeah, I did not
um,
see that.
yeah, so and one last thing to kind of close it out is you're talking about the 2017, 2019 with the sign stealing and stuff, and that was actually a topic that was brought up during the series by the White Sox. So they basically accused the Astros of stealing signs when they were playing in Houston, saying that they hit a lot better there. Where I mean, they do hit a little bit better at home, but the White Sox were actually had wider home road splits. So, um, I think they need to stop making baseless claims. I mean, the thing about Houston is they're always going to get that kind of talk because of what happened in the past. But, I think that teams maybe need to worry about the White Sox need to worry about themselves a little bit more. And then they intentionally were hitting people in game 4 when they were down big. So I didn't like that. But, um, I think they're probably going to see some tempers when the two face off next year. But, um, we'll see. And to close it out, it was a good series. Probably the least entertaining out of the 4, honestly. But mainly because none of the games were really all that close. So um, definitely a big win for the Astros, and they move on. So
Yeah, well, let's jump over to the other series in the AL, and that's going to be the number 1 seed Tampa Bay Rays against the wild card winners Boston Red Sox. This is definitely a series I did not see going this way, where the Red Sox ended up having 2 come from behind wins in games 3 and 4 in Fenway to walk off the Tampa Bay Rays and win this series 3-1.
yeah, so this series started off with the Boston or Tampa Bay winning at home. They came out on fire. Randy Rosarina, after last year, the series the postseason he had last year, came out, hit a homer in game 1 and stole home, a straight steal of home in game 1, which was really entertaining. Tampa really looked like they were gonna be the team to beat. But give the Red Sox a lot of credit. They battled back game 2. They got down early, but they came back with a couple of home runs. Actually, I think they hit 5 home runs in that game. Um, and then games 3 and 4 were 2 of the most entertaining games of the postseason. Game 3, you had a 13 inning game where with one of the strangest plays I think I've ever seen. I don't know if you saw, because you said you
Yeah,
weren't able to catch all the games, but
no, I know which one you're talking about.
yeah. So basically, at the plate, you had Kevin Kiermaier hit a ball. There was a runner on first. Kevin Kiermaier came up and he hit a really high fly ball to right field, bounces off the track, or bounces off the wall, hits about halfway up the wall, bounces off the warning track, bounces off the outfielder, and goes over the wall. And so nobody knew how that was supposed to be ruled, because if a player picks up the ball and throws it out of play, then it's up to the umpire's discretion on what base the player gets. So and there was no doubt in my mind, because I think it was actually a hit and run too. So there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the runner would have scored from first and taken the lead. This was a 1-1 game in extra innings. But what they ruled was that's actually, and it was correct in the rule book. They ruled that was a ground rule double. So the runner had to stop at third, and since there were 2 outs, the next guy came up and got out, and ended the inning. So basically, the Rays really just kind of got screwed over by a really weird play that has I mean, it was the correct rule. They didn't get screwed, I guess, but it was a really, really strange play that, is in a really unused rule very often. And then in the bottom of the inning, the Red Sox hit a 2-run walk-off home run for Christian Vasquez, which, of course, they scored 2 runs on it. So, you could say that didn't matter, but of course, the game might have gone differently had it been, it might have been played differently um, had the ball been, had the guy scored. So we'll see. That was a really interesting play. I think it's the first time I've ever seen that happen. So, um,
Yeah,
and
it's not
yeah,
the first time I've ever seen it happen. I do know it was actually a game. I believe it was Tampa Bay, and I want to say Toronto had it happen. It was a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and it was down the line. And who was it? It was their left fielder at the time. Picked it up, and actually it was the Rays fielding the ball, and the left fielder picked it up and like went to go pick it up in Tampa Bay, and it like rolled off his glove and into the stands or whatever, and they called it, like Kevin Cash went out there and argued it, and they called it a ground rule double as well. So it wasn't the first time I had seen a play like that, but it was just a little different because this one was bounced off the wall and then it hit him that way, where this one was like down the line. He tried to pick it up and but definitely this is a bigger scenario. That was in a regular season game. This is a playoff game, extra innings where, the go ahead run would have scored. I mean, he was already around third when they put their hands up in the outfield. That's how much with the hit and run going on. He absolutely was going to score on that. And Kiermaier might even got to third. I think he was standing on third actually. By the time everything got sorted out, but I didn't think that the Rays were going to be able to not really lose it, but I thought their pitching would come through a little bit more. The loss of Tyler Glass now, and then they didn't even have put Yarborough on the roster for this series. They only had one left-hander, and it just seemed like Boston found a way to to find their hitting, and it was really interesting as well because by the time we recorded this, nobody had known, or by the time God, I'm messing this up big time. By the time the series started, there we go, we didn't know what the status of JD Martinez was because he actually sprained his ankle running out to the outfield because he has a ritual of stepping on second base in the wild card game, and nobody even knew if he was going to be on the roster to start the series. And then he ended up playing. I think he pinch hit in game one, but then he ended up starting in game two. And really in game two, that's kind of when the Boston offense kind of took off a little bit more. But it was one of those kind of like gutsy series kind of from Boston. Like everyone counted them out, and then they just found a way to make it happen. And then the Rays pitching, which had been their strong suit all year, which is one of their strong suits all the time, just kind of failed to deliver.
yeah, and one thing about that pitching that I was, watching the Braves series, and Jeff Francoeur was talking about, and he wasn't necessarily talking about the Rays, but every time that bullpen door swings open, there's a chance you bring someone in that just doesn't have it that night. And when you get in the postseason and you start having the Rays have always been a team that opens that bullpen door a lot and go, they don't have, they're kind of a positionless pitching team where they don't really have defined starters, relievers. They just kind of throw everybody. And, you got in a situation where there were a couple of times they brought in somebody who didn't have it. I think Shane Baz pitched some. See, I think he actually started one of the games, but he didn't have it. You had Shane McClanahan didn't really have it in the final game of the series. So, you end up in a situation where sometimes you just find a guy who it's just their off day, and when you start pitching 5-game series, you or 4 games in this case, and your guys are pitching every night. I mean, the Red Sox get 4 looks at a guy, and he's also maybe gets a little bit fatigued. It gets really tough for that bullpen to really pitch well because those bullpen pitchers typically only have 2 pitches that are really good. That's why they're in the bullpen. They don't want someone seeing them a lot, and that's something that to look at. A lot of the teams that are real successful in the postseason have some of those really good starting pitchers. You think about, the Dodgers have, 4 really good starting pitchers. You think about, 2019, the Nationals had Strasburg and Scherzer. You think about, going back further, the Astros, Verlander, Cole, Greinke, whoever it might have been when the
Morton.
Astros were in it. Morton, yeah, I mean, everybody. So this is another case where I think that the bullpen, maybe was maybe was a little overused in this series. But I mean, if you don't have any great starters that can go deep into games, I mean, you don't really have a choice. But definitely an interesting series. Who do you think? Looking at the series and stats and everything, who do you think MVP would be here?
It really came down to a choice between either Kike Hernandez and JD Martinez. But we had to give the edge to Kike Hernandez or Enrique Hernandez, however they want to say it. But guy came out 450, batting average of 429 on base, which is really weird. You very rarely see an on base below a batting average, so I don't know how that quite is. But he had a
Sack fly.
couple. That could, yeah, that is true.
That's the walk-off sack fly in
Oh yeah,
Game Four.
that is
Yep.
right. Huh?
Yep.
But he had the most at bats for this team. Was the second highest batting average, right behind Martinez. A couple big home runs for him, like Matt just said, the walk off sac fly to send the Red Sox on to the next round of the playoffs. Um, and he's finally a guy who's getting an everyday opportunity. He was a guy who always been really good with the Dodgers, and now he's getting his everyday opportunity, and he's proven it all year long. And when the lights were the brightest, he definitely showed out the most for the Red Sox.
Yeah, and he's also always been a great postseason performer. You think about the 3 home run game, the clinch
Yep.
against the Cubs a while back. He had a couple home runs in the NLCS last year. He's a guy who's always been a good postseason performer. So definitely an entertaining series. This was probably the most entertaining of the series that already finished, I would say.
Yeah.
It was a lot of good, a lot of good baseball played by both teams, and obviously 2 walk-off games which were obviously tied in the ninth inning or later, as we saw in this one. So definitely some good games, good series there, and Boston, overcame a lot this year. Um, there was a time there, it looked like they weren't going to make the postseason because of, those the fact that the Blue Jays, the Mariners, the Yankees were all hot on their tails, and then they had the COVID issues right at that same time, and it looked like they were going to fall out of it, but they kept pushing through it, and we'll see what they're able to do in the American League Championship Series against the Houston Astros. So.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that one in just a little bit. But let's jump over to the NL side now, and then we'll talk with the NLDS with the Milwaukee Brewers and the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, so this was also a really good series. Very low scoring games. Games 1, 2, and 3 I think it
9
had a
runs.
combined 9 runs. Yeah, game one, the Brewers took 2-1. Um, Charlie Morton looked really good in game one, and he gave up a home run in the seventh inning to Rowdy Tellez in a 0-0 game. Corbin Burns also looked good. He actually was a little bit off early in the game, but the Braves had some trouble getting runners in. They had runners on the corners in the first inning with nobody out, and couldn't get them in. Had a double play, and it was really a struggle. Corbin Burns I think walked 4 or 5 guys in the game, but he powered through it. He ended up having a really nice game. So it's a potential Cy Young winner. Had a great postseason. I think that was actually his first postseason start because last year he was injured when they played the Dodgers in the wild card series. But he looked good. And then game two, Max Fried just pitched a gem of a game, and that's just kind of what we're going to talk about here with this series was that Max Fried pitched a gem. Ian Anderson came in game three, pitched a gem. Um, the Braves bullpen, which had been, for most of the season was really, really, really bad and held them back a lot. They only allowed 2 runs in 3 games. So, I mean, in 4 games, excuse me. So, and that was in game four when they had Huascar and Noah came in like the fifth inning and gave up a home run, and that was it. So, um, definitely some interesting stuff. Game four was really entertaining. You had back and forth game. The Brewers went up by 2-0. Then the Braves came back, and the Brewers Rowdy Tellez hit another 2-run homer, and then the Braves came back again, and then Freddie Freeman hit a home run off Josh Hader in the eighth inning to put the Braves up 5-4, and they were able to hold on in the ninth to get the win. So and close out the series. So it was a very entertaining series. Great pitching all around. I mean, Brandon Woodruff pitched well in game two. He actually came back on 2 days rest to pitch out of the bullpen in game four. Charlie Morton pitched on 3 days rest in game four as well. So just a fantastic series. One that was, very, very reminiscent of what we saw from the Braves last year in the first 2 rounds of the postseason with the pitching. So they had 2 shutouts again in this series. And last year, if you remember, I think they had 4 shutouts in their first 5 postseason games. So which was pretty crazy, but definitely an entertaining series. And the Braves are moving on to the NLCS.
Yeah, I think the whole only issue that I had with this series was that the Braves' reluctancy to bring Burns back early on 3 days rest in Game 4, just to I mean I know the starter didn't he allowed 2 runs in Lauer, but I mean to me you have to have start Burns there. I mean they were trying to save him for potential Game 5 when you could have had Woodruff in Game 5 on full rest anyways. I just you had to bring Burns in there. It's such a big game. It's a do or die game, and maybe he's able to not allow some of those 2 runs early that Lauer allowed, and then you don't have to go to the bullpen maybe so early. You can use your guys later on. It ended up being that it was a tie game and that Freeman hit the homer off Hader, but it's just maybe it was a different game if they actually start Burns on 3 days rest instead of trying to hold him when you would have had a guy who's just as good in Woodruff start Game 5 when you brought him out of the bullpen on Tuesday's rest. Anyways, it's just it makes sense to me why they didn't start Burns in that game, and maybe it would have pushed to a Game 5. Had he started it potentially, but I think overall we expected the Braves to win this. They're the better team. They have better pitching. They're hitting even without Acuna. Riley's really stepped up this year. Freeman's a Freeman. Albies is really insane right now. They have postseason Jock for a reason. They don't call it Jocktober for no reason. He came in, hit 2 homers. They did lose. The one thing is they did lose Jorge Soler to testing positive for COVID in the middle of the series. I'm not quite sure how that all means for if he's on the roster for the next one or if he's not. Is he still eligible? Because if you take somebody off, from an injured roster, then they can't come back the next series. So because he was out for COVID, is he ineligible for the next series in the NLCS or what?
So to answer that, supposedly he can come back, but I think it has to be 10 days. So I think he would be able to potentially come back for Game 5.
So then at that point, does
Yeah.
that make so they replaced him with Pache. So if they bring Pache on that and he pull Pache off for Soler, is Pache now ineligible if they were to move to the World Series?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I don't know about that. I mean, it's
that's the thing. I
interesting.
mean, we didn't get to see this at all last year, really. So I mean, I don't know, and so that's one thing because Soler's actually been really good for the Braves as of late. So it's really interesting for this, but like I mentioned, I think we all expected the Braves to win this series, anyways. They're superior team to the Brewers. The Brewers just kind of got their way through the NL Central, who had those bad teams with the Cubs and the Reds falling off as later on in the season and the Pirates. But
Yeah, the
overall,
Brewers. Yeah, the Brewers' issue coming into the season was always going to be the offense, and
yeah.
they were able to get a lot out of guys who weren't, kind of top name
Well,
guys, but the pitching in that division
and
is not good. So
and also it was big for the Brewers that they didn't have Devin Williams. He ended up breaking his hand. I don't know if we talked about that on the last episode, but he ended up punching a wall or something and breaking his hand, and he was unavailable. Was going to be out until maybe the World Series if they got there. But that was their second best reliever. That was the guy that they would bring in to bridge to Josh Hader. And maybe that's why they had to bring in Woodruff and other stuff during other games. But that was a big loss for them as well.
yeah, no doubt, and I don't know how much it ended up mattering the way the games flowed in this series, but
No.
still, anytime you add that depth to your bullpen, you maybe end up pitching Devin Williams earlier on in a game, or maybe he bumped somebody up. I mean, they had a rookie throwing in Game 4 yesterday that gave up a run
Yeah.
in Aaron Ashby, so. Um, it was definitely something that was you would probably point to, but definitely entertaining series. As you mentioned on that, I wanted to point out on that Corbin Burns thing. I don't know exactly why they went with Woodruff on 2 days rest out of the bullpen over Burns on 3 days rest.
Well, I'm just talking
But
about starting the game with
oh yeah,
Burns.
I know I agree. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't know why they went with that, but Corbin Burns has pitched out of the bullpen before, and I think the main reason is probably because they said, they were talking about in game one that he has struggled in the first inning of appearances getting the feel for his cutter. And that's really when people have gotten him. So maybe they felt like Woodruff would be a better option coming out of the bullpen than Corbin Burns. But I don't really know what the issue there was. But definitely an interesting series. The Braves ended up pulling that one out in 4 games, and they'll move on. But MVP, real quick, we've talked about this one a lot. But Freddie Freeman, he hit the game-winning home run, but he also had a really good series. Had some couple doubles in the series. Just a good job by him. I think he hit 308 with a 471 on base and a 615 slugging in the series. So he was the Braves' best player, who's actually only one of only 2 Braves starters. Actually, 3 Braves starters did hit over an 800 OPS, but Freddie Freeman was definitely the guy to watch in the series. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, especially with him hitting that big homer off Hader to pretty much seal the series. So. Well, let's move over to probably the most entertaining series for most people and the most nerve-wracking series and making my blood pressure boil. But that's the Giants and the Dodgers. The biggest rivalry in the NL side. And we knew this series was going to be insane. Game 1, Logan Webb was just insane for the Giants. Walker Buehler didn't look that great. Gave up an early 2-run home run to Buster Posey in the first inning, and that kind of just set the tone for it. And then Webb just had his dominant outing and shut the Dodgers out. And then in game 2, it was kind of a different story. Gossman kind of struggled a little bit, and then Julio Urias for the Dodgers was, on his game as he has been this season. And then I think the real turning point in that game was when they walked, I believe it was Pollock in front of Urias, and then Urias got like an RBI single, and that kind of just allowed them to even jump further. I think at that point that was the first runs they had scored, and then the Giants got 1, and then in the 6th inning it just kind of broke all open. And then they got to game 3. That was the game I wanted to talk about the most because that game was insane. There was like 40, 50 mile an hour winds going around in LA and Dodger Stadium, which is very, very rare. You never see that. And the wind was blowing like a weird direction. It was from center field to right field. So any ball that like went from center field to right field was just going to be farther than any ball that was, normally hit that way. And then left field, it would die down. So there was swings from both teams that you would thought were like for sure home runs to the left field. And then they wouldn't even get to the warning track. It would just die right in front. And then Evan Longoria hit 1 against Max Scherzer. I believe it was when was that? The 7th inning that he hit?
I think it was like the 6th inning, maybe 5th inning. Yeah.
Yeah. In the 5th. And then that really was the only run that was scored. It was a 1-0 game. But the wind in this one was, I'm trying to find the exact stat. There's something that overall in the game, there was like 10 hit balls that had an expected batting average over like 700 or 750. And none of them were hits. Like that's what it was. And even Gavin Lux's, he came in and, pinch hit in the bottom of the 9th with 2 outs. He hit 1 that everyone thought was for sure gone. It was to left center gap. And it barely made it to the warning track, and they caught it. And I believe it was Jeff Passan ended up tweeting it out, something like the ball that he hit was like 80, had an expected batting average of 870 on it, and like 62 times this year, with the same like launch angle and velocity off of that, like 62 times, 55 out of the 62 were hits, and like 38 of them were homers. It was just, it was one of those where the wind just kind of took everything over, and it was a really fun game. Don't get me wrong, because just watching, I mean, at one point it blew Max Scherzer off the mound even. Like he went to go do a pitch and he lost his balance because the wind gusted him off. And then, yesterday's game they had, which was a potential game or series clinching for the Giants. They started Anthony DeSclafani, and the Dodgers have hit DeSclafani really well this year. And ended up the game was a lot closer for longer than people it felt like. It really felt like it was a 7-0 game right away because I think the Dodgers scored within like 3 batters of the game, and then again in the second.
Giants just kept getting themselves out of jams somehow.
Yeah.
Too.
And in game 4, the Dodgers started Walker Buehler on the 3 days rest. He asked for the ball. And it really felt like he was much better than he was in game 1. It felt like his command was a lot better. He wasn't trying to overuse the fastball. He was able to rely on those secondary pitches a lot more. And it really kind of set the tone for the team just to go out there and be comfortable. But this game 5 is going to be something. You're going to have Logan Webb pitching at home, where he's been dominant all year long, against the Dodgers, where he's been dominant all year long. And then you're going to have Julio Urias, who has pitched really well against the Giants, has pitched, I think, 3 games in San Francisco this year, and he's given up like a combined 3 runs or something. So the game tomorrow between this, it's the only game that's going to be on. So if you guys are anywhere near a TV, throw it on. It's going to be nerve-wracking. And if you hear any screaming, it's probably me from California.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited for tomorrow night's game too. Um, winner take all. I think they said this was the third time ever that the Dodgers and Giants will play a winner take all game, and one of them was they were both in Brooklyn, and or the Dodgers were in Brooklyn and the Giants were in New York, and then the last time was like in the 60s. So
I
uh,
don't
def-
I don't know about that because this is the first time the Dodgers and Giants
well
have ever
they
met in
were
the playoffs.
winner take all games, but not playoff games. So like end of the year division winner take all
Oh, maybe.
type
Yeah, but
stuff.
that's insane in itself. It's 150 years, and it's the first time the 2 biggest rivals here have met in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like
So
that's crazy.
but
But
yeah, so it'll
if
be
we,
an interesting it'll be an
yeah,
interesting game 5 for sure.
it definitely will be. And we've talked about MVPs of the other series, and I just wanted to mention the MVPs of this series is either going to be Logan Webb or Julio Urias because they've both had dominant games early on, and then they're facing head to head this game, and it's really going to be which one of those guys kind of blinks first. I really feel it's going to be one of those low scoring, maybe 1-0, 2-1 type games that the pitching is going to be so dominant. Somebody's going to have to scratch like early and get on the board, and that's going to really ride it out from there. So if we had to pick one, it'd probably be out of those 2.
Yeah, the pressure will be on in this game, and I think you could really see a game that ends up a lot like the wild card game, with 2 teams that are having a really hard time scoring, and it going late with these 2 pitchers throwing. So we'll see. It'll be interesting, but winner will obviously winner take all tomorrow night. It's what you love. Everyone says best words in game sports are Game 7, and this isn't technically Game 7, but it's the same thing as a Game 7. So buckle up. It's gonna be fun.
It absolutely is. Well, let's jump over to looking at the ALCS, and then we'll kind of briefly go over the NLDS, but although we don't know what the matchup would be. But the NLD or ALD or gosh, sorry, I'm messing this all up. The ALCS game 1 will be Friday. I believe it will be in Houston. It'll be at 8:07 Eastern time on Fox. And then it'll go through Saturday and that. But who do you think really has the edge in this series? Are you going to go with the Red Sox, who have been as of late, or are you going to go with the Astros, who have kind of been around all the time?
Yeah, I mean, this series. These teams seem very evenly matched, honestly. You got the Astros. They've got some. I think they're maybe a little bit deeper in their lineup. They've got some guys who they've both got guys who have a lot of experience. You talk about the Red Sox with Devers, Bogarts, J.D. Martinez, among others, Kike Hernandez, all these guys, Schwarber. And then you got the Astros have all the guys with experience. Correa, Altuve. Um, Bregman, Gurriel. I just think they're a little bit deeper with Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker going along with those guys as well. Michael Brantley. But you look at the pitching, because I think the lineups are pretty equal. Maybe the Astros have a slight edge in the lineup, but it's pretty even. And pitching wise, I think a lot depends on for one thing the health of Chris Sale. How much is he going to be able to pitch in this series? Is he going to be able to start games? Is he going to be himself when he does pitch? How well is he gonna do? Um, but I honestly, I like the pitching of the Red Sox just a little bit better, at least the starting pitching. I like Evaldi a little bit better than anybody the Astros have. I think that you go beyond that. I think Eduardo Rodriguez might be a key as well. He's a guy who had a really good second half, but struggled a little bit in the playoffs so far. Um, So I think you might look at Eduardo Rodriguez, which version of him is going to show up in this game or in this series. So and the bullpens I think are pretty equal. This should be a really entertaining series. I think there's going to be a pretty good amount of runs scored in this series as well, because I think both of these lineups can really hit. And not that the pitching staffs are bad, but you don't have a lot of just dominant pitching in this series for either team. So it should be a very entertaining series. I think there's going to be a lot of runs scored. I think this will be a one that people are going to remember.
If you just had to make a blind, quick prediction, who are you going with, and in how many games?
If I had to pick, I would probably go with the Astros in 7 games. They'll have the home field advantage too. If they play Game 7, it'll be in Houston. So
All right, I will go with Boston in 6. I don't know. It has one of those feels of that Boston, those Boston years where they're not the best team, but they just always find a way to win. And I like the energy that they have right now. So I'm gonna go with Boston in 6 for sure for that one. But we can kind of look at the NLCS a little bit. Well, it's going to be either the Giants or the Dodgers. We know that against the Braves. It would be two different things because the Braves would, if they play the Dodgers, the Braves would have the home field advantage. If the Giants are in, then the Giants will have the home field advantage. So we'll have to work around that a little bit. But which team? Maybe this is the way to ask it. As a Braves fan, which team would you rather face?
well, I think as a Braves fan, I'd much rather face the Giants. I think a lot of their success this year has been, you know, a lot of one-run wins, a lot of close games, being able to get clutch hits at the right times, and you know, but and also a little bit of luck. I think has been the case for the Giants. Stuff like in in Game 3, they had a lot of luck in that game the other day. So I think the Dodgers are the deeper team in both pitching and hitting. Um, I think the Giants have some veteran players who probably handle the situation just a little bit better than a couple of the Dodgers younger players do. But I definitely am in the case that I think the Giants are a much more beatable team than the Dodgers, even though the Braves would have to play on the road in games 1 and 2 against the Giants. I think they're definitely a more beatable team.
Yeah, and I think that what that is if it's against the Giants starting pitching isn't as strong. Like Webb is great, Gossman has been really good, but Wood, who pitched a fantastic game 3, we didn't even mention him against the Dodgers. He pitched a great game 3. He can be hittable at times. And then DeSclafani hasn't really been what he was early on in the season. He's really struggled as of late. And then they don't really have, anything else in the starting pitching wise behind that. I mean, Johnny Cueto, I don't even think he's on the roster. He might be hurt even. I'm not even sure. But if it was the Braves in that, I think the Braves would have a little bit of an advantage. But I was talking to my buddy the other day, and doesn't this just feel like one of those Giants like even year magics? I know it's 2021, it's an odd year, but doesn't it just feel like one of those years where it's just like that even magic year? Like, man, they shouldn't be this good. Here they are, but they're just going to find some way to consistently win. And even in the playoffs, they're going to find that late hit, that kind of clutch hit. It just feels like that kind of year. Do you get that same kind of vibe?
A little bit. The thing that I worry about with the Giants is I just don't think they're as talented as those teams were. I know they're very talented. They're a lot more talented than we gave them credit for. And of course, manager Gabe Kapler has done a great job this year mixing and matching the pieces they have. But um, I just don't especially believe that they're gonna be able to pull out guys like they've had such great contributions from guys like Lamont Wade, guys like Darren Ruff, um, you know, and of course all their veteran players. They're
Yeah.
veterans, and Brandon Crawford had an MVP caliber year. Buster Posey, when he's played, he's had some injury and workload management type stuff, but when he's played, he's been incredible this year. Hit over 300 this year. Um, I think that it does feel like one of those years to a certain level. I mean, they won 107 games when they really were probably more like an 85, 86 win team. I mean, um, they've had a lot of magical moments this year, won the division. They were the first team to win that division other than the Dodgers since like 2012, I think. So, it's been a long time for that. But I mean, if I look at the Giants, I mean, looking at it on paper, I just don't expect them to be able to win the World Series this year. I really don't. I think they're good. I think they're way better than anybody ever thought they would be this year. They definitely deserve to be there. They've done all they could. They won all the games, but I don't feel like, and I feel like they're putting up a much bigger fight than I thought they would in the postseason. But this is a team that I really don't believe is gonna. I don't believe that they're gonna be able to beat to win the World Series. Now they might beat the Braves. The Braves only won 88 games, and they're missing their best player, and they're missing one of their key contributors that replaced that player now in LCS. So they could beat the Braves, but I just don't see that it being that type of year for them. But definitely a very entertaining season for the Giants. So.
Yeah, and then if it was the Dodgers and the Braves, it's going to be the rematch of what we saw last year. Although both teams might be missing their best player this year. I mean, Acuna is out for the Braves, and then Max Muncy. It sounds like he would even be out for the NLCS as well with his dislocated elbow. But it would just be that rematch of what we saw last year. Those two teams that just dogfight. The Braves blew that lead, the 3-1 lead. The Dodgers came back somehow. I know how the hell they did that. But then I just think that this year the teams might even be even more matched, like evenly matched this year than they were last year, because the emergence of Riley is a big step for the Braves. He was a guy who the Dodgers really exploited last year. Against them. Dansby has been really good this postseason. You still have Jock, who can, against the Dodgers, he'd probably play a lot of the time because you'd probably start him against righties, I would assume, especially if Solaire's out. You would think, right?
Yeah, they probably will start Jock against righties the rest of the postseason, especially like even with Soler healthy. Um, Jock probably starts against righties just because he's hitting real well right now. So
Yeah. And then the starting pitching really, I mean, it really matches up well with Fried, Anderson, Morton, who have all shown in the postseason they can do really. I think Ian Anderson's still undefeated in his postseason career, if I saw that right. Fried has just been insane in his postseason career so far. Morton, we always know he's such a big game pitcher. And then you look at the Dodgers side, you have Buehler, who's one of the big game pitchers as well. You have Scherzer, who is, Max Scherzer, we know him. He's just as good as he's ever been. And then Urias, who has been, probably he's probably been a Cy Young candidate pitcher this year, and he's just not going to get the credit because everyone else has had an insane year that we're talking about. With Kershaw being out and then with Soroka being out, that kind of one pitcher's kind of out for each one. I know we didn't really see Soroka at all the past couple years, but still. And so I feel like starting pitching matches up well. The bullpen is where I think maybe the real divide is, because you said the Braves bullpen hasn't been strong this season, although they have performed this postseason so far. And it just feels like the bullpen is a real strength for the Dodgers right now.
yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. I think the Dodgers lineup is still deeper than the Braves. And because you look at the Braves lineup and you go down that list, and missing Ronald Acuna Jr. is such a huge deal because, I mean, you're looking at replacing a guy who was probably going to run away with MVP this year with, Eddie Rosario, who's a pretty good player, but, he's not Ronald Acuna Jr. You replace him with Adam Duvall, Jorge Soler whenever he comes back, if he comes back this year from the COVID issue. Um, you know, and Jock Peterson, who can be really good, but at times is all these guys have major disadvantages to them. So, but really, your point comes through with the Braves bullpen, and I think the biggest issue for me with the Braves bullpen is the depth of it. Right now, there's really only three pitchers you can trust at all out of that Braves bullpen. I mean, Tyler Matzek's been really, really good in the postseason and all year. Luke Jackson's had a great year. You can trust those two guys in setup roles. You can kind of trust Will Smith as a guy who has closed a lot of games this year. Didn't give up a run in the division series, pitching in 3 games. Had a good finish. He had a really rough stretch for about a month and a half coming down the stretch late in the season, but the last week or so was a lot better. So he's kind of turning it around a little bit. But um, and then you got a wild card in AJ Minter, who since coming back from AAA late in the season has been a lot better. And we saw what he did in the postseason last year. He's been a great postseason pitcher in his career. So you got some guys, but beyond that, I mean, you're talking about a couple rookies. You're talking about a couple guys who have really underperformed this year, guys who have struggled as of late. Huskar Noah has struggled as of late. Drew Smiley is a part of that bullpen right now. I mean, you've got Dylan Lee's a rookie who has pitched like 2 innings above AAA in his career. So um, you're looking at a bullpen that just doesn't have a ton of depth. So they're going to have to rely on their starters to go deep into games. Now, of course, you can bring in a Drew Smiley to get some innings and not give up just a ton of runs in a game. But you're looking at kind of like what I was talking about earlier in a 5-game series, but this being even more magnified in a 7-game series. You're going to give a lot of looks at these guys out of the bullpen to the Dodgers. If you come into these and all these games are close and they end up having to pitch 4, 5, 6 times in a 7-game series, you're giving them a lot of looks. And I think that's a little bit of what happened last year in the series was that, the Braves bullpen started to get hit late in the series just because the Dodgers started seeing these 2-pitch pitchers so much. They kind of had seen what they had to offer. So I think that's something that you're definitely going to look at when it comes to the series. And I think that the Braves are going to win it. They're going to have to win it kind of early. So.
Yeah, it is interesting. Too bad we don't know the exact matchup, so we can't really dive into it a lot more. But I think we did a pretty good job of giving kind of what both series would kind of look like.
Yeah,
But
and I will say, talk about the pitching matchups that the Braves are in a great spot from winning in 4 games. They're going to have Charlie Morton able to, or they're going to have Max Fried ready to start on, I guess, a couple of extra days of rest on Saturday, and then Charlie Morton will actually have regular rest on Sunday. So they are going to have their 2 top guys ready to go on time, and then Anderson will pitch Game 3. So the Braves are in perfect pitching situation. And we'll see where the Dodgers or Giants are at after tomorrow. Because I mean, there's a pretty good chance. I feel like if the Dodgers end up throwing a Max Scherzer out of the bullpen tomorrow, or the Giants end up throwing Kevin Gossman out of Kevin Gossman out of the bullpen, something like that. So
yeah, I wouldn't expect Scherzer to come out of the bullpen tomorrow. They've pretty much said it's unlikely, anyways. They've pretty much just set him up for the Game 1 start. And if that is the case, then it would be Scherzer on rest. Buehler would start Game 2 on rest, and then Urias would start Game 3 on rest as well. So I don't think that the matchups. I think more it would be for the Giants side because they're using Logan Webb tomorrow, where they would have to start a Gossman on.
And I would imagine that unless the Giants were up big, that Gossman would come out of the bullpen because he's got a lot of experience doing that.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, unless they do know that they can win, but we'll that is going to be interesting to see. But I doubt at least that Scherzer, if it was for the Dodgers, I think the pitching is lined up a little bit better to handle it going into the next series with them having Buehler started yesterday and then not really wanting to use Scherzer for Game 5. So having the option to use Urias at least. But that's pretty much going to wrap up this episode of everything that we can really talk about. Next time we come to you, we might try to do it on Monday since there's only the one game with the Red Sox and Astros, and that'll give us a good, we'll have 2 games of each of the series to kind of talk about. If that works with you, we'll talk about that off air, but that'll probably be that. It's going to be sometime in the middle of the ALCS. So we'll let you know what's going on there and kind of what we are looking forward to going forward. But do you have anything else that you want to wrap up on?
Nope. Just I'm excited for these championship series games, ready for them to get going. I can't wait for tomorrow night's game. It's going to be a great one to watch. And I'm very glad that I'm going to be able to sit back and wait for my team's opponent instead of having to be part of that game because I know how that game goes sometimes. So
yeah. And just one quick thing I want to say: if you guys don't know where to find them, the ALCS will be on Fox, and the NLCS will be on TBS. So that's where you can find those games. They haven't announced really start times for any of the other ones outside of Friday, which would be at 5 my time, 8 Eastern time. So, but anyways, thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.